And that is when it's nice to let them know that you could beat them up.
Michael Scott might be our favorite regional manager, but could you really work for him? He has a way of getting himself and his employees into sticky situations. But luckily, Michael is always able to weasel his way out of trouble, like the time he quit his job and started his own company, but somehow still got his old job back after he couldn't handle all the extra work. Now that's impressive. Here are 10 of the best times Michael Scott got himself into and then out of some truly troublesome situations. The whole Scott's Tots situation might be the worst trouble Michael's ever gotten himself into. Thinking he'll definitely be a millionaire by the time he's 40, Michael promises a group of inner-city third graders that he'll pay for their college tuition. All they have to do is get good enough grades to get into a university. But we all know that Michael's plans for the future didn't work out quite like he planned. 10 years after the initial promise, Michael is busy dodging calls from the school as his tots are about to graduate. He gets invited to a thank you event in his honor, and we have to watch as the kids perform a musical number and give him heartfelt speeches about how much his donation means to them. It's truly painful to watch. Michael eventually fesses up about not having the money for university, but he makes up for falling through on his promise with something much better: a whole group of laptop batteries. Yeah, well, I guess it's better than nothing. But Michael is lucky that he got out of a situation without having to cough up any money for a whole class of kids to attend university. Remember when Michael had enough of Charles as the new VP of Northeast Sales, so he just quit his job and started his own paper company? After Charles displays a pretty no-nonsense attitude around work, Michael decides things have gone too far, and he pitches his own business to the rest of the office. Pam is the only one that Michael wins over, and the two of them set off to start their very own paper company.
Let's go!
All right.
Enlisting the help of Vikram and Ryan, the crew sets up office in the only free space they can find, a room right under Dunder Mifflin. The company goes surprisingly well for a while, but then Dwight happens. Michael was holding secret meetings with Dwight for intel, but once Charles starts treating Dwight better, he decides to sabotage Michael at one of their own secret meetings. He brings Charles along to catch Michael in the act, and the Michael Scott Paper Company ends up meeting with the VP to talk about a possible buyout. But instead, as a show of solidarity, Michael negotiates for his, Pam, and Ryan's jobs back, with benefits. So despite quitting his job, Michael ends up back where he started, except this time he looks much more like a team player. Michael and Jan's relationship ended up being pretty messy, but that should be no surprise given how dysfunctional the couple was since the beginning. When the office first finds out about Michael and Jan dating, it's when Michael accidentally sends a topless photo of her to the whole company.
Uh-oh.
After Michael gets back from Jamaica, Pam notices a vacation photo with Jan in the background. Michael tells the camera that he and Jan traveled together, but they're keeping it a secret for now. When Michael attempts to send a vacation pic of the two of them to Todd Packer, he accidentally sends it to the entire packaging department. Then Daryl, never one to miss a good opportunity, ends up sending it to others until the whole office has seen the racy photo. Jan eventually finds out about the photo and shows up to confront Michael. Just as we think it's about to go down, she ends up telling Michael that she's inexplicably attracted to him and wants to continue their affair, then asks if he wants to go back to her condo. Michael is just as surprised as the rest of us, and he somehow manages to weasel his way out of this one and get a girlfriend in the process. After a distracted Michael hits Meredith with his car in an epic Michael moment, she learns that she's infected with rabies. Talk about a bad day for Meredith.
Okay.
Feeling guilty about the whole incident and wanting to look like a hero, Michael decides to host the very first Michael Scott's Dunder Mifflin Scranton Meredith Palmer Memorial Celebrity Rabies Awareness Pro-Am Fun Run Race for the Cure. Just rolls off the tongue there, doesn't it?
I'm just trying to take everybody's mind off of this unavoidable tragedy.
The rest of the employees are less than enthused about the idea of running for fun or taking part in one of Michael's crazy ideas. But nonetheless, they end up raising $500 for the cause, and Michael spends $250 of that on a giant check and a fake nurse. Toby ends up winning the race, leaving Michael depressed and dehydrated. But after seeing all the hard work Michael put into the cause, Meredith finally forgives him for hitting her with his car. So Michael's fun run was a surprising success after all. Wanting to spend more time with the new warehouse worker, the office decides to organize a happy hour. Jim and Pam invite their friend Julie so that they can introduce her to Michael. It starts going pretty well, with Julie laughing at everything Michael says, but then disaster strikes. Michael finds out it's a date, and he decides that only Date Mike is up to the challenge.
That, my friend, changes everything.
Inspired by the winners and losers of reality TV dating competitions, Date Mike is erratic and unpredictable.
Hi, I'm Date Mike. Nice to meet me.
He starts driving Julie crazy, and their date crashes and burns. Date Mike causes such a scene that the bar manager, Donna, even has to threaten to throw him out. Taking the threat seriously, Michael calms down, but then he decides to confront Donna. Instead of fighting, the two end up flirting? Donna offers him a free lunch at the bar and the two continue hitting it off. So Michael ends up having a successful date night after all, and everyone else tries to collectively forget that Date Mike ever existed.
That's actually pretty funny.
The iconic episode Stress Relief aired right after the Super Bowl in 2009, so The Office had to find a way to really hook new viewers. They did this by having Dwight stage an elaborate fire safety drill that ends up going very wrong. Poor Stanley even had a heart attack, but don't worry, Michael was there to pick up the pieces. Michael decides that it can't be him or the work safety hazards that are stressing out the entire office. Instead, everyone must be stressed because they are reluctant to express their feelings. So he does what any good boss would do. He organizes a comedic roast of himself. Every Dunder Mifflin employee takes turns throwing jabs at Michael until he starts to get increasingly uncomfortable. He ends up storming out and taking a personal day. When Michael comes back to the office, he's armed with terrible jokes. He ends up roasting each of his coworkers with one-liners, but it's when he gets to Stanley that he finally breaks the tension by saying, "Stanley,
You crush your wife during sex and your heart sucks. Boom, roasted.
Stanley laughs sincerely, and Michael tells his employees that they're the reason he's in the paper business, which earns him a heartfelt round of applause. Michael is less than impressed when Toby returns to the office as their HR representative.
No! God, please, no! No!
At first, Michael takes the high road and tries to be friends with Toby, but he just can't do it. So instead, he decides to go with the next reasonable option: frame Toby and get him fired for good. Michael and Dwight team up to come up with a plan to get Toby to violate company policy. First, they try to use Pam as bait to get Toby to commit harassment, but Pam refuses to be part of the scheming. Next, Michael tries to provoke Toby into punching him, but Toby doesn't fall for it. So finally, Michael and Dwight decide that the best option would be to plant some illegal herb in Toby's desk. Michael buys what he thinks is the illegal substance for $500. That's how much she wants to get Toby fired. Dwight calls the cops and they show up to search Toby's desk. Michael's guilt finally catches up with him, and he tries to take the blame, but there's really nothing to be blamed for. The police find the evidence, but it turns out it's just a bag of caprese salad. Michael's skills as a leader can be questionable at times, but he somehow always ends up doing the most to keep his employees happy. After being dumped by Jim, Karen becomes the regional manager at Dunder Mifflin in Utica, New York, and tries to lure Stanley away from the Scranton branch. Michael, believing that Karen is doing this to get back at Jim, decides that he's not letting Stanley go so easily. Michael and Dwight decide to go on a trip to Utica to prank Karen's branch, and they trick Jim into going along with them.
Are you kidding me?
After a failed attempt to steal the branch's industrial copier, Karen discovers their plan and calls them all into her office. She takes Jim aside to mock him for what she thinks is just an elaborate plan to see her again. The failed group returns to Scranton where Michael says goodbye to Stanley, but the attempted prank wasn't a total waste. Stanley decides to stay in Scranton, revealing that his threat to leave was really just a bluff to get a raise. Michael has always been competitive, so is it really any surprise that he ends up getting into an actual fighting competition with the equally competitive Dwight? Talk of Dwight's karate experience gets Michael interested in a match between the two of them. They set up a lunchtime fight at Dwight's dojo, but the match is lackluster to say the least.
Schmidt!
Hey, what the hell was that?
Michael ends up emerging victorious after the pitiful fight, but an angry Dwight holds a grudge. He ends up changing his emergency contact from Michael Scott to the hospital to show just how serious he is about their falling out. But by the end of the day, Michael decides that Dwight's earned something after all. He ends up promoting Dwight from his lowly assistant to the regional manager position to his dream position, assistant regional manager. Unable to hold a grudge with his new title, Dwight forgives Michael and hopefully forgets all plans for a rematch. Michael is pretty incapable of keeping a secret, so when he learns that the new employee Martin is a former criminal, he ends up telling the entire office. Now that everyone knows, Martin tells the others that he was incarcerated for insider trading, and that prison isn't really all that bad, especially the outside time and art classes. Pam comments that prison sounds better than work, and of course Michael takes that as a challenge. He decides it's time for some fresh air, so he sends the entire office outside in the freezing cold. But this new office routine calls for a new office manager, so Michael calls a meeting where he takes on a brand new persona.
I'm Prison Mike.
Prison Mike tries to be edgy, but Martin comments that this new Michael doesn't really remind him of his time in prison. So Prison Mike decides it's his time to take things seriously and lock the entire staff inside the conference room so that they can really see what it's like to be incarcerated. Toby ends up convincing Michael that everyone was just teasing him, and they like work a lot more than they'd like prison. Michael eventually lets everyone out, but Martin decides Scranton's too much for him, and he quits. Meanwhile, Michael is just happy to know that everyone doesn't hate their jobs, and thankfully, he gets rid of Prison Mike for good. What's your favorite time Michael got himself into trouble? And what's the best way he's ever gotten out of it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to ScreenRant for more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.